Hello, welcome back to Digital Garden 25. I'm here with Joel Rothstein, a partner at Greenberg Taurig LLP. Joel, thank you so much for joining us. You just moderated a fantastic panel session, which was, we'll dive into that in a second, but how's the event been for you so far?
It's been delightful. I really enjoy this event. It's unusual to have an event like this because you basically have all the different players in the data center industry in one place. So there hasn't been much of these sort of previous events in Japan or in Tokyo, so it's quite nice to have an opportunity to sort of meet everybody all in one place.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know about you, but we attend a lot of regional events. I think something that's been really interesting about Digital Garden is that single market focus, and as you say, there's so many different parts of the ecosystem here. It's led to some really interesting discussions. But yeah, with that in mind, as I said, you just moderated a finance and investment session. Can you just give us a quick overview of some of the key points that were discussed there?
Yeah, so we had on our panel, a number of experts from some of the major data center players here in Japan, and we talked about some of the main issues that people are facing who want to enter the market, and what are the strategies, what are the opportunities in the market. So we covered things from, what are the strategies for financing deals, what are some of the geographic regions that people are looking into in order to successfully conduct transactions. And also we talked about even as well as what are some of the risk factors that people are concerned about when they're doing deals in Japan. One of the things that I think came through most clearly from our panelists was how Japan stands out when you look against other markets across the APAC, because one of the questions that we had for the panel was, what is the pitch you make to investors if you want to invest in deals in Japan? And frankly, no one had difficulty coming up with a pitch.
Yeah.
For what's the investment thesis for Japan. I mean, if you look across Asia, it looks like there's many countries in Asia, but when you sort of drill down and consider where are the markets where you could have investable scale, where you could do many projects, where you don't have all the restrictions on data usage and repatriation of foreign capital, there's actually not many countries. So
yeah.
Japan somewhat stands out in that regard.
And I guess also with that, the size of the Japanese economy compared to some of the areas that are popping up as Asia Pacific hotspots, there's so much domestic demand here as well. Do you think that's playing in a lot to the enthusiasm for the market?
Yeah, I do think it's the size of the market. It's the fact that you could be an international player in the market. In other markets in Asia, there's basically very stringent restrictions on foreign ownership of data center related facilities or controlling the data. And Japan is somewhat an open and transparent market, so that definitely makes it a favored investment destination versus a number of different areas. In other countries, some of the data center demand is being developed by local laws, which basically requires the onshoring of data. So if you have customers, you have to have their data in that country. And so those developments in some countries are happening because of that, but Japan doesn't have that issue.
Right.
You could be a global player and be in Japan.
Yeah. That being said, though, I feel like we have seen quite a lot of partnerships spring up in Japan between international firms moving in, whether they be Asia headquartered or somewhere in Europe or the US, and partnering with Japanese tech companies, Japanese real estate firms, Japanese finance institutions. Why has that become more of a trend as a way of entering this market?
I would say it's sort of two factors that lead to all the joint ventures and the need to sort of cooperate with others. One factor is the ability to source deals. So often having a local partner, they might have access to the land, they might have access to the power, and so if you are a foreign player, you need to have a joint venture partner to help facilitate the transaction. Another factor why I think there's this demand for joint ventures is basically data center deals are large transactions that require a lot of capital. And certainly if you're bringing in a joint venture partner, it expands your capital base, and so you're able to sort of do additional deals, do larger transactions. So a very high percentage of the deals that we work on are actually joint venture deals.
Okay.
And the potential joint venture partners in Japan could come from many different sources. As you mentioned, it could be a power company, it could be a real estate developer, it could be a telecom company. So the range of potential partners in Japan is quite broad.
That makes sense. So I guess you could see it as that ability to get additional capital than if you went in alone. Should we see that trend of more JVs here as a sign that there is a lot of deals to be struck in Japan rather than it being like a challenging market where you need that local support, or is it a little bit of both?
It's probably a little bit of both, but I actually view joint ventures as a positive factor. It sort of indicates the fact that you're able to attract joint venture partners who in some instances might not be in the data center industry, indicates to me that in the larger market, data centers are actually a demand asset for people to be invested in and to be involved in. So I view as sort of joint ventures and as being an important component of the deal flow here in Japan.
Yeah, definitely. Something else that was discussed on the panel was around like kind of like project financing and real estate financing side of funding like kind of like new projects here, and also recapitalizing kind of like stabilized assets. Can you just give us a quick overview of like what these unique factors are occurring there in Japan?
Yeah. So one of the aspects of data center deals is the fact that you need substantial capital investment, and data center deals are getting increasingly larger. And so the capital investment required for the deal is becoming increasingly large. The specialized data center finance industry actually is not that old. And one of our panelists was commenting on our panel that his team is basically only 5 years old. So it's not a well-developed area of specialties within the banks until recently. So I think that that's actually a positive trend, because before that, no one could really figure out, if you have a data center related financing transaction, which department within the bank or a financial institution does this sit with. And so, as you do more deals and as you have more specialty, it will facilitate more transactions if you have a specialized team that sort of understands the business. And that's the trend in terms of what's going on in the industry. More specialization and broader options for financing than there was previously, I think.
Okay. And do you think that will eventually extend to, in the US, we've seen like much more of a trend towards like securitization of data center assets. Do you think that's something that might be coming over to APAC sooner rather than later? I think there was a report that Blackstone were exploring ABS for to finance air trunks expansion. Is that something you expect to see more of over the next few years?
Yes. I mean, securitization in general across Asia is not nearly as developed as it is in other markets.
Okay.
But there are securitization laws in places like Japan and Korea and so forth. So I could imagine, particularly some of the investment banks creating products that will have securitization or at least syndication of deals. And so the syndication of the deals could happen in many different forms. One form is, of course, securitization. Another area that we've seen as well is actually club fund structures. So basically you might have a sponsor of a data center platform basically gather together 3 or 4 institutional investors, and they basically form a club fund to invest in deals. So the finance options or the way to attract capital actually is quite broad, and it's limited by the creativity of the participants, really.
Got it. Well, at the end of your panel just now, you asked everyone, if we're back here in 2030, what do you think would be the kind of like biggest development that we've seen in the Japanese market? But I noticed you dodged that question yourself, so I'm going to ask it to you now.
It's hard. I think one sort of question mark that I think a lot of people have is, AI, is it really going to be as big as people think? Because, that's sort of a moving factor for data center development and also the dispersal of data center projects beyond the core area.
I've noticed quite a lot of people saying that here, which is uncommon. Like normally there's just like this steadfast commitment that like AI is here, it's here to stay. Like don't mention that it might go away. Do you think there's a reason why there's that's kind of different here? Like
I don't know. It's the unknown. So much. If you think about it over the years, so much of what has happened has been unpredicted. Like mobile phones and having everything in your pocket. Maybe 20 years ago, no one imagined that it would be to the extent that it is today.
Yeah.
So, I think AI is like that. We're seeing it at sort of the beginning phase, but it may go in a completely different direction that people don't expect today.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of an area that. On the one hand, people are very excited about it. They think it's going to fuel demand, but then on the other hand, people don't know, to what extent it's actually going to expand, and also to what extent it's going to be regulated. From a lawyer's perspective, you don't know to what extent it might be reined in, whether there might be limitations on it, and so forth. So I think it's interesting. I think, one thing I've learned by being around for so many years is you could always try to predict the future, but you ultimately have to go with the flow and see how things develop and sort of capitalize on things as they emerge.
Well, there's a lot of going with the flow for sure coming up. I think in Japan it's definitely a really fast-moving market. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. Joel, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Very
Really
much.
appreciate
My pleasure.
it. And you can check out thetechcapital.com for more news, views, and industry insights.